Okay. Uh, and I started as a PO in probably 2012 and worked as a PO for almost 10 years. So I almost have about 15 years total in corrections, five
Okay.
as a counselor, 10 as a PO. I did 5 years on the street at District 43 in Grundy and 5 years at ADC when it was still kind of a boot camp, but transitioning to CCAP.
Very good. Well, let's begin in the beginning then. So I started in corrections in 1974,
Okay.
and I started as a counselor. And my background a little bit, I come from a family where dad was a minister, and then there were 9 kids. And all of the kids were fortunate. My parents were able to send us all to college. We became professionals by all means, different walks of life. However, no one was solely a minister, but four of my siblings, my two brothers, and I have 6 sisters and 2 brothers, and my 2 brothers are both retired military officers, and one was a naval commander, and another one was the Marine Corps, uh,
Wow.
but but they're also ordained ministers. And then my sister, Norma, she is a nurse. She's a baby, the nice one. She is a nurse in the surgical unit in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And actually, she runs that unit. And she's also an ordained minister. My sister, Linda, is a retired electrical engineer. And she is an evangelist throughout Central America with her church in Panama, where we all grew up in the canal zone of Panama to Jamaican parents. And so that gives you a flavor, kind of like the orientation of her family. The ministry figured prominently in her family, and my sisters who are not ministers, one married a minister, and the others have been very, very much tied in and connected with her church. So that's her footing, that's her background. And so I was not a minister, but I've been involved with the church from a little kid growing up, and still am right now in our church. I am on the one of the church boards and very active right now. And so I share all of that to give you an insight into our thinking and what kind of drives us. And while I was not officially a minister, I've always told folks that my ministry was corrections. And in corrections, I was just ministering to inmates. I was ministering to everyone, staff, inmates, visitors, and it's not necessarily preaching to them or any such thing or proselytizing. It's a matter of how you live your life and the things that you value. And that way you're setting an example and ministering to others as well in that form. And so I began as a counselor, and that was my mindset. I wanted to go in and I wanted to help inmates to be better. And that's why our slogan, when I left the department, our slogan for the last several years was, "We are in the business to help people be better or to do better." And so that's something I really valued, and I felt it could explain the thinking behind pretty much all of our decisions and all of the ideas and so forth and things that we have, trying to help people to be better, no matter if that person is a staff person, an inmate, or whatever, because you help people to be better and to be successful. You, in essence, are creating public safety.
Absolutely.
And so that's the approach that we took to that. So I started off as a counselor, and about 15 and a half years later, I became the director of the system. I started as a counselor in 1974, and then in 1990, I was appointed director after progressing through the ranks from counselor to unit manager, unit administrator, associate warden custody, associate warden program, assistant superintendent, all of those positions in between. And then I became the warden. And then from warden, I became director of the system. I've really seen the system change, beginning first in Nebraska. as a counselor, and then becoming director there, leaving Nebraska and being the Secretary of Corrections in Washington State for almost 3 years. Then the Commissioner of Corrections in Massachusetts for exactly 3 years, and then director in Virginia for 13 years. And so I saw a lot of changes over the years as I move on. When I came in Nebraska, uh, it was a mixed bag. There were those that were supportive of rehabilitation and programs, but on the other hand, there was a lot of abuse
Mhm.
inmate abuse, and so forth. There's a lot of things going on that could technically land somebody in prison
Yes.
for engaging in those kind of behaviors. And so I actually saw those things and I witnessed those things. And so right away, I was placed in a position of having to speak out against individuals who were perpetrating these acts. And so right away, as you can imagine, I was not liked. I was not liked by some of my colleagues simply because I could not quietly tolerate and condone the things that they were doing and saying. So I spoke to legislators, senators, and so forth in Nebraska, people who could do something about what was going on. And strangely enough, they did act, and things occurred. And I was never outed by the legislators and so forth, but they were able to come in with an understanding and a knowledge of what was going on, and were able to target certain things and make changes in the law that caused things to be better and laid a much better foundation for the system as a whole. Up until this day, a lot of people in Nebraska doesn't know what happened or how those
Yeah.
things came about, and that's totally fine. Some do. Some people who were close to me and knew what was going on understood because it was a very difficult time of a lot of high stress. And that's why, up until I left the department, I was lecturing to colleagues and staff within the DOC, VDOC. And one of the things that I always said to them was always struggle to do the right thing. It's not whether or not you should act or not act. You want to struggle to do the right thing,
Mhm.
regardless of personalities or who is involved. And then at the end of the day, after having done so, if they still like you, that's extra.
Yes.
That's extra. But you don't set out to be liked. You don't set out to win friends or ever. That's always a goal, but it's extra and it's not what you first sought out to do. And so that thought impacted every level of my career throughout, from director on down to a counselor or a unit manager or a warden or whomever. That was always in the forefront. Doing the right thing. Struggle to make sure you're doing the right thing. And at the end of the day, if they like you, that's extra.
Absolutely.
And that's how I made my decisions throughout my career. And some of them uh, were monumental. I had to say no to governors. There's one case where the governor wanted to put a prison in his hometown.
Hmm.
This is going to be the largest prison in the state, and his hometown could not accommodate this prison. But he had to promise these folks in his hometown jobs and so forth. And I had to tell the governor no. And that was a big news splash because the way the bill was written that authorized the construction of the prison,
Hmm.
it said the director of corrections, using his or her professional judgment, is responsible for making that decision. Well, the way they wrote the law authorizing that put it right on my back.
Hmm.
You are responsible for making that decision. You can't cop out. You can't say the governor told me because it took it away from the governor and they say you are responsible for that decision. And so I had to tell the governor, sorry, governor, I recognize that you can fire me, but this is a responsibility that I have given to me in the law that you signed. And so ultimately, I was not fired. Ultimately, after a lot of articles in the newspapers and so forth, and all across the state. This was in Nebraska. Uh, I kept my position. I actually ended up spending 8 years with that governor.
Wow.
And so the 2 year, two term limits, 4 years each term, and spent 8 years with that governor while a lot of folks thought I was going to be fired. And I was prepared to be fired. And that's the thing about leadership. You have to be prepared to do what's right. And it's not about you keeping your job.
Absolutely.
It's not about keeping your job. So I saw a lot of changes as the pendulum swung from a mixed bag of treatment and programs, but also inmate abuse and locking people up forever in seg and forgetting them and that kind of stuff. And the state lost a lot of lawsuits over that too, because of what they did. And so I was right out there fighting that stuff in the very beginning. And I think that throughout my career, always have had people within the systems who supported treatment and rehabilitation, but to varying degrees, people who were not supportive of those actions. They did not support treatment, did not support rehabilitation. And so my position has always been that we are in the business of causing change to occur. And wherever I went, it's about causing change to occur. And I remember having one governor that after we sat down and talked things through, this governor realized that what I was saying makes a lot of sense. So he said, okay, we're going to strike a deal. You keep on doing what you're doing. You keep on promoting programs, treatment, rehabilitation, but do not use the word reentry.
Wow.
He said, just don't talk about reentry. You can do it all day long. You can do as you need, but just don't use the word reentry because this governor was seen as a conservative governor
Okay.
and
Okay.
had an image to maintain and was okay with me doing what I got to do and keep just doing it quietly and getting the results because we had the data to show the outcomes that we were getting. And he said, just keep on doing that. That makes all the sense in the world. But don't be out front there talking about reentry. Get
Okay.
to it a different way. And so that just kind of shows you that when you're talking about politics, it's not always what you see.
Absolutely. So
It's
you
not
use
always
data to try and combat um,
exactly.
any hesitation to evidence-based programming or reentry, what you're trying to do.
Yeah. And actually, then a second governor, and this second governor, she got really upset at me. And she was not the one who said don't use the word reentry, but she got really upset at me because I was talking about reentry, and some people went to her and were very, very critical. And she got upset because I had not explained to her what reentry meant previously. Well, it's not every day that you're going to do something within corrections and you call the government and explain it to them.
Yes.
It just doesn't happen that way.
Yes.
But that occurred on that occasion. But after all was said and done, she was fine. And but it makes good sense. But even in Virginia, when I got to Virginia, well, first of all, I was encouraged. I was in Massachusetts at the time
Mhm.
when I decided to accept Governor McDonald's offer to come to Virginia as director. And I was told in Virginia, don't go to, I'm sorry, in Massachusetts, don't go to Virginia. That's a southern backward state. As a matter of fact, I accepted the position, and there's a Sunday morning editorial in the I'm sorry, the Boston Globe. And this former legislator was saying, how did we manage to lose a progressive commissioner to a state south of the Mason-Dixon line?
Yeah.
And that was the caption. And
Yeah.
so, but I said to myself, it's a challenge. It was a much bigger system. And Governor McDonnell on the campaign trail was talking about reentry, and that got my attention, and that's why I applied for the job. And he was talking about reentry, and he wanted to support reentry and so forth. And then, actually, before I even applied for the position, I read where he had appointed a reentry coordinator to support the Department of Corrections, both within state government and in the public sector.
Wow.
The public and private sectors.
Hmm.
And that was Banshi Tiwaldi was that person. I don't know if you remember Banshi Tiwaldi. She was the person who got that job. So I applied for the job, got interviews, and I came down, I got it. And he was very, very supportive. He never turned back. As a matter of fact, I have not had a governor in Virginia that I've worked for, two Republicans and two Democrats. I have not had one that has came out and advised us not to do something that is supportive of reentry. And they have not taken anything away from us. They have given us their varying degrees, but no one is taking anything away from us.
And you were, correct me if I'm wrong, you were the longest serving director of the Virginia Department of Corrections. Is that correct?
Still am, yes. I served for 13 years as director. Next to me was 8 years. We had Ron Angelone served for 8 years. We had Gene Johnson served for 8 years, and we had Murray also served for 8 years. They served two terms, but they all served terms for the same party, either all Democrats or all. I'm the only one that have worked for both Democrats and Republicans.
Yes, yes. Let me ask you, with probation in particular, when you came in, parole was already removed from Virginia in the 90s. Uh,
Yes, 1995.
yes, back in 95. Um, did you have any discussions or thoughts on whether that should have been brought back, or you could have used it as a um, incentive in the prison system, or to help use in probation and parole? What was your thoughts
Well,
on
as a
that?
matter of fact, I had conversations with several legislators on the subject, but it's interesting. Each one, different parties,
Mhm.
each one wanted what they wanted, and each one wanted to hear what they wanted to hear. Either support it or don't support it. Support bringing it back or support keeping it away. And my position has simply been that, you can call it whatever you want to call it. What's most important is how you implement the laws that are in the books. And also, what's most important is whether or not you are giving the people the opportunities that are necessary. Now, with parole, discretionary parole, it can be structured in such a way that is very prohibitive.
Mhm.
It all depends on how the law is written, or it can be very, very open. And so that's why I argued that, call it whatever you call it. All you need to do is to have in place a system where people know what's expected and people are going to be accountable as well. And I think what Virginia tried to achieve that with the sentencing structure that they came up with, wherein they try to keep the most violent offenders within the system
Yes.
and get the others out. Some will argue that that was actually better than some parole systems because some parole systems are much, much tougher than that. It all depends on how the laws in that particular state jurisdiction are structured.
Uh,
And so I told him that I could argue for it or I could argue against it. What's most important is what kind of outcomes were you getting? And so you may not have parole, but the law itself can be written in such a fashion that certain individuals get certain credits and benefits as opposed to the discretionary parole.
Such
That
as
will
sentencing guidelines and
exactly the
things like
sentencing
that.
guidelines and so forth. And that can help you in some situations much better than any parole situation could
Absolutely.
because you know what you're going to get. It's clear, it's fair, and so forth. And you can always keep on tweaking those based on evidence, based on the law, I'm sorry, not law, what the evidence to determine whether or not they need to be tweaked one direction or another direction.
Yes, I know when I left, they had just changed the sentencing guidelines to the first probation violation resulted in no time. Then
Hmm.
the second one up to 2 weeks. And then by the time you got to the third one, then you were looking at, well, more serious time that the
Yes.
judge could impose. And, I thought that was a good thing. And they changed it to where if the offender had a new charge as a probation violation, that shot the guidelines up. That would kind of take it out of just a technical violation.
Hmm.
And to me, that was really good because that eliminated a lot of frivolous probation violations that you may
Hmm.
see for some stuff, and it dealt with the more serious ones.
Exactly. And with parole as well, with parole, it's very subjective. And one person may benefit from it and another may not because of that subjectivity. But when you put it in the law and into guidelines and so forth, some will argue that's more fair
Yes.
in that people know what to expect. It's not up to somebody's subjectivity. It's not up to politics if you're going to get it or not, because those things are debated based on merits and facts and then put in place. That is, guidelines are, and then put in place based on evidence. The parole systems just create a lot of subjectivity. And I have actually worked in states that had parole, and I've really actually seen it just totally being ineffective as it pertains to certain individuals being able to access it who should have otherwise.
Yes, yes. Um, what did you see with staff expectations? When you come in, like I said, I pretty much started my career with you and then
Hmm.
finished a few years before you left. So, the healing environment and the staff expectations were always there when I come in. What do you think the staff expectations were, especially among probation and parole, once the more rehabilitative model really took place and the
Hmm.
evidence-based practices took hold? Do you see that they increased? Do you feel like you were requiring a lot of your staff to be able to implement these policies?
Well, before I got here, they had done their research on me. There were a lot of Google checks and everything else, and they had called colleagues in all of the states that I worked in.
Hmm.
People, people were really doing their homework. And when I got here, I found a cadre of individuals who were really pro law enforcement,
Hmm.
and I found folks who were wanting and chopping at the bits for a chance to implement rehabilitative programs.
Hmm.
And I don't know that I can give you an exact percentage as to who fell in what bucket or which bucket, but I can tell you that I saw it growing, that is the appeal growing for rehabilitation for programs. And people were much in a much better position to justify that. I see the number of people who just wanted to lock them up and throw the key away
Sure.
dwindling over time. A lot of them just became silent and they were just, sometimes folks can be passive aggressive and they just go into that silent mode and just kind of like, we'll wait until you fail. And then, we had people who made false claims and allegations against us to legislators. And I had to go in and correct the record and speak to these people and so forth. So they're always there. People oppose to programming have always been there. There are a lot of people I believe today still in the department that would just like to lock them up and throw the key away. It wasn't too many years ago. I was at one of our facilities, touring with Mr. Robinson and the warden and a few others, and this senior correctional officer wanted to talk with me about why we were taking so much time providing programs and treatment for inmates, but that we were not doing that much for victims. And so I had to take the time to explain to him, first of all, we are doing a lot for victims. He didn't even know what we were doing for victims. So I explained to him what we were doing for victims. But then I also explained to him that that's not our first responsibility, however. Even though we're doing a lot of things, there are other entities that are responsible for caring for those individuals. But we do also do a lot. And that kind of just shows you what's in people's mind. I was glad that he asked to talk to me. I was glad that he brought it out. So we had a chance to talk about it. And hopefully that conversation helped him in further conversations that he had with others in portraying a much accurate version as to what was going on within the department, especially with victims and treatment.
Well, I teach seniors, and one thing I tell them is 90% of everybody incarcerated today is going to be released. Do we
Yes.
want to make them better when they get out, or do we want to make them worse?
Hmm.
So you are looking at long-term public safety by trying to deal with the problems that led them to be there in
Hmm.
the first place.
Yeah. And that's a conversation that I started after I got to the DOC as well, because the VA DOC has historically done a very good job with incapacitation.
Hmm.
And they run safe and clean facilities generally. But I had to help them understand that there was such a thing as short-term public safety that comes with effective supervision and probation and parole and incapacitation. But what we're after is not that short-term public safety. We're after long-term public safety that comes with change. And that change is realized through programming and treatment and so forth. And so that conversation started a while back after I realized that as something that was something that we needed to be emphasizing.
Yes. What was when you implemented all this? And I know it's across the entire corrections, and I got to see it from both ends. Being at the ADC, I was a probation officer in a correctional facility, but then I worked out in the field as well. So I got to see it
Mhm.
from both directions. What was your biggest obstacles in implementing this type of culture and this type of environment? Was it political? Was it structural? I mean, you come in and you basically change the entire viewpoint of the Virginia Department of Corrections. Like you said,
Mhm.
it was a lock them down type of organization. What was your biggest obstacles in changing that?
The biggest challenges came from certain staff. And then these staff, some of them had access to legislators. And the legislators would reach out to me to have conversations because of the contacts they had with these staff. But they did not pose much of a challenge. The legislators did not. They just basically reached out to me so they could go back and tell their folks they reached out to me.
Hmm.
But we had some people who were sort of incalcitrant and they were not going to move. They were not going to do anything differently. And they were going to slow walk you.
Sure.
And we saw that, quite frankly, happening more so in certain facilities versus others.
Mhm.
And I remember there's one situation in probation parole with this deputy chief of this probation district, and uh, I brought NIC, the National Institute of Corrections, in to provide training for the chiefs and for their deputies at one point. And they all had to write papers as a result
Hmm.
of this. I don't know if you heard about this or not,
No, I haven't. This is good. I want to hear it.
but they all had to write papers and turn into NIC and so forth. So I got a call from Dr. Eggers from NIC,
Hmm.
and he said, Director, just want to let you know that you have a deputy chief for probation that is really not supportive of what you're trying to accomplish with leadership training and with change and programs and so forth, and that this guy is preaching racism.
Mm,
And we bring this to you because this guy is a deputy chief.
absolutely. Yeah.
And this guy wrote a paper for NIC, and his paper was on the excellence of General Lee and why General Lee is the best leader that you could ever encounter in these United States historically.
Yeah, he
And
knew.
he actually he was living this stuff to the degree that he wrote this
Hmm.
and turned it into NIC as a project that they that asked him to do, write a paper. And so I called him in with his chief and with his regional administrator and with Chief Robinson.
Hmm.
And I had the paper before me. I just made him clear to him that NSC had provided this to me, and I had highlighted a lot of sections and so forth, and we went through the sections with him. And because I told him, I just want to get into your head with you for a second and understand your thinking, and why did you say this, and why did you say that, and others. Well, at the conclusion of the meeting, which lasted about an hour and a half or so,
Hmm.
the chief wanted to talk to me, and the chief wanted to know if he was going to be fired, but he and his deputy. I said, no. I said, you're not going to be fired. I said, however, we're going to be close watching you, and especially the decisions that you make and who is impacted by those decisions. Because what you're telling us here is very damning. And it's telling us that you perhaps do not have the ability to effectively apply justice. You seem not to be able to discriminate effectively. And so we have a problem here that we have to watch very closely. And so we did. The deputy decided to leave, so he left,
Hmm.
and the chief eventually decided to retire. But
Yeah,
I made it very clear to them that we were going to be watching them because we are into rehabilitation, we are into programs, we're into effective leadership, and being biased has its place, but it's how we play it out.
absolutely, absolutely. What would you say? And I really appreciate you being so generous with your time. What would you say that the department did well under these changes, and what do you think it could have done better looking back?
Well, I think the department did well. We started dialogue, and that got a lot of people talking with each other
Yes.
in ways that they never did before. And I got a lot of feedback. I got feedback from people in the uniform, from the preparation parole districts, all walks of life. I got feedback, and I still get it today. I still run to people today. You know, I go to retirement or I go somewhere, whatever, and they say, I just want to tell you, you know, that dialogue, the healing environment, were things that have touched my life and will continue to touch my life as I go forward. That's not going to change. But just getting folks together and getting people to talk, I think was a big, big, good thing. A lot of folks supported that. And the surveys, the annual surveys that we do or did, I don't know if you're still doing them, but those annual surveys, people always picked the healing environment and dialogue as two of our biggest initiatives. And because as they saw those things play out, it impacted their lives and it made a difference in their lives.
Well, I
So I
can
think,
tell you, as a high school teacher,
hmm
we start every class with a check-in, and
hmm
the kids, absolutely, at the end of the year, I get them to tell me some of the things they liked about the class, and
yeah,
they love the check-in because sometimes we'll do the whole class and it'll be on the check-in.
yeah, yeah. So I think things that we did well, I think one thing that we did well was to get people to start to talk and to break down the fear that existed and to
Mhm.
create more trust. Because as more trust was created and people realized that they're not going to get shot because of their thought processes and so forth, then they're more open and they're more willing to speak. Some folks didn't do it well, but it's fine. It's a learning process. Now we go along and we want them to talk. And so I think that's one of the things that we did very well. It was opening up the conversations and breaking down those walls that caused the fear and creating those barriers. What could we have done better? Wow, there's always more we can do. I was hoping that we could have taken dialogue to even a much higher level
Mhm.
because I think we are really still even though we are dialoguing and we created the work in dialogue and the offender walk and so forth and on and on, you know, even after doing all of that, there's a lot more we could do with dialogue to begin to dissect people's thinking, both staff, visitors, and inmates, and taking it deeper into the institutions, deeper into the districts to get more benefit out of it.
I don't know if you got to see CCAP once it had fully changed to what
Hmm.
it is right now. I got to go back and visit when I did a few interviews there, and it's what I always envisioned, and the people who work there that supported Healing Environment, what it should be. If you hear
Hmm.
the detainees at the end of the day, they do like almost like a checkout. I forget what they call it at the end of the day, but they go up there and they have a big meeting and they kind of
Yeah.
all talk and to hear the dialogue, the discussion that goes on among the offenders now versus when I was there and it was a boot camp, it's night and day, and
Hmm.
it's so productive. The staff who work there love it. It's much, much less stressful than the old boot camp environment, and it's producing amazing results. So, I mean, it's still having an amazing effect.
And something that we did well, obviously, reentry. For the last 12 years now, we have either been number one or number two with the lowest rate of recidivism in the United States. And so we have done that. But why did we do that? We were able to do that because I think of the implementation of dialogue and getting people talking and talking critically about how we can improve what we're doing.
I think that's the key aspect, being able to have open conversation, even if it's disagreements. Well, this
Exactly.
is what we need to have, not just, yes men and yes women,
Hmm.
yes, we want to have a good discussion. And I seen that really change over the department over your tenure. So that was, as somebody who was on the ground level, I never went any higher than a probation officer. You did see that switch,
Hmm.
and you did see the ones who were more against it, just like you said, kind of become quiet
Yeah,
after a while.
and I recall clear this one officer, a sergeant, came and told me. He said, "Listen, I never had a good conversation with my major until we started dialogue."
Yes,
He said those conversations were not good; they were not productive, and I could not say what I wanted to say
yes.
until we started dialogue. And it gave me not only permission and license to do it, but it helped me understand how to do it and how to
Well,
voice and how to listen and how to do all those things.
well,